everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Tomcat Stitchery. I'm Whitney, and I've got a more in-depth make for you today. So I had shown you all back a couple weeks ago now my finished Christmas makes, and one of which was the Kelly Anorak that I made for my daughter out of the soft shell fabric. Now, this was the first time, and I had said that I was going to do a more in-depth video just on this jacket, and that's what this video is. I really wanted to talk about sewing with soft shell fabric. This was my first time sewing with soft shell fabric. I'm going to talk about what it is, and then some of the tips and tricks, and then I just wanted to talk about some of the details of the jacket and just a little bit more in depth, some pictures of her in it. She's got it. She loves it. So that's really, really good. And then, yeah, just kind of going more in depth into this project. So when I had announced that I was making this jacket and kind of showed the fabric and everything, I had a few comments about, oh my gosh, soft shell, good luck, you know. One lady even said, be prepared for a lot of cursing and have a stiff drink at hand. And she was like, I don't even drink very often, nor do I curse or something like that. And I'm like, that says a lot. And I also took on this project right after I had done my reversible flat iron coat, which I'm loving, by the way. Oh my gosh, that thing is perfect for like throwing on just to run errands or whatever, because it's literally like wearing a blanket. It is just phenomenal. But I talked about, you know, sewing that leather binding and, you know, just being like very tense and trying to help things through the machine. I kind of felt the same way. Or even just being tense, like, please don't shift, please don't shift. You know, you have some of those projects where they have to be cared for just so much more. You know, I heard someone say once that children, you've got dandelion children and orchid children. Dandelion children are the kids that can just flourish and they just can go and they don't need a lot of, you know, hardcore attention and that kind of stuff. And they're just, you know, easy to raise kids. And then you have the orchid children that while eventually it's going to be a beautiful thing, but they're just a lot more work to get to that point. Same thing with fabric. You've got, or projects. You've got the projects where, oh, they go together so quickly. They're an easy make. You know, you're working with cotton or whatever, and it just goes up. And then you've got the ones that take a lot more time. And while they're wonderful once you get through it, sometimes it's a little more taxing on your psyche to get to that point. And this was one of those. And I kind of did two back to back, trying to wrap my brain around how to do a reversible coat and then the leather binding, and then doing this one right after it, right before Christmas. I about did myself in. But I made it, and we're in the new year, so woo! Okay, again, I made the closet case pattern Kelly Anorak. This was my third time making this jacket. This coat comes, it was originally released as an unlined coat, and then later she released a lining pack to go with it. I have made this coat unlined, and I've made it lined. And I did my lined coat, that was on the channel at the end of last year, I believe, and it's kind of a raisin colored, and I quilted some Liberty Tana fabric to Thinsul it, and so that's my lining, and it's my winter coat. It is wonderful. I love that coat. So when I was doing this for my daughter, we'll talk about the fabric just a little bit. I did the unlined version because soft shell fabric is like, it's synthetic, so it is a I don't know, like a nylon kind of, it may just be all polyester, but kind of, it's a waterproofed, almost outside layer. So I say waterproof, water repellent. I think that if you were to stand outside in a torrential downpour, eventually this would seep through, but for running around in showers and stuff, it could definitely be a rain jacket, just not for the torrential downpours. But it's perfect for, you know, the spring little drizzly showers where you just want to kind of keep wet. So I'd call this water repellent fabric, not waterproof. But it's kind of smooth and slick on one side, and then on the other side, it is fleecy. So I wanted to do the unlined coat so that I could take advantage of the fleecy side because it just feels lovely. And I think that this coat did turn out well. However, again, there were some precautions that I had to take. Now, Lauren Guthrie from Guthrie and Ghani had done a little, I think they were selling it, it's from when her daughter was pretty young, so it's been maybe a couple years ago that she posted the video, but on sewing with soft shell. So this is when soft shell first kind of came onto the market, and they were selling it in their shop, and she was making a little jacket for her daughter, and so she kind of gave some tips on sewing with soft shell and what she did, and I found that very helpful. So you may want to, I'll put a link down to her channel. You'll have to search for that video, but I'll put a link down to her channel. I'm sure you guys are all aware of Lauren in the Guthrie and Ghani world, but that did help. So I did use a lot of her tips, but I'll just kind of go over them now. Let's go over the details of the coat first, and then I'll talk about sewing with soft shell. So I did the hooded version. And it talks about in the instructions on how to, just for anything, to bind the neck edge once you've attached the hood. And so I did that with this ribbon that I had in my stash, and actually this worked perfectly. The soft shell does not ravel, and it is bulky. So I wanted to not fold things over as much as possible. So I trimmed my seam allowances fairly short, and then I just sewed this on over the seam, and then it gets covered up by the facing on the hood facing on either side there. I also used the ribbon for the hem because, again, I didn't want to fold anything over on itself. And again, in the instructions, it talks about finishing off the hem with bias binding, and I actually did that with my first unlined version. But for this one, I literally just used it, I sewed it to the fabric, wrong side of the ribbon to the right side of the fabric, and then just kind of folded it up once and then stitched down the other side of the ribbon to the hem of the coat. And it's a fun little detail in that fun stripy ribbon from my stash. What else? I also opted, now the pockets in this coat, it has like a faux, this pocket flappy piece is a design detail, and you actually go into the pocket from up above. But on their website, they do have a pattern for making these functional flaps, and that's what I used. So yeah, that's the lining fabric. I'll talk about that in a second. So it's an actual functioning pocket. The other one's a functioning pocket too, but the flap is functioning on this one to help keep, I need to trim some little threads there, but to keep that all nice and closed up, because I did want this to be kind of a spring rain type jacket for her. And I didn't want water dumping into the open pockets. What else? I omitted the waist. There's a drawstring that you can put in the waist. I omitted that for her just because she hates anything up against her waist. In the past two Kellys that I did purchase the hardware kit from Closet Case. I'll put a link down to that down below. But for this one, I'm like, I've got all the tools and stuff, and really all I needed was a zipper and the spring snaps, and I was able to get both of those off Wall Wax, so I did not buy the hardware kit this time, especially because I didn't need grommets or eyelets or whatever for the drawstring around the waist, because she does not like that kind of thing. But I used a white zipper, 26-incher, that's got the antique brass teeth on it. It's a YKK zipper. And then I got the antique brass spring snaps. Now, you can buy the spring snaps. I feel like I've talked about these a lot lately for different projects. You can buy the spring snaps from Wall Wax, but you cannot buy the tool to install them. Now, the tool to install them, it's two little metal pieces I actually got with my Kelly hardware kit, and they work with these, so I can just buy the snaps now from Wall Wax and use those little tools to install them. But you can use any kind of zipper. We'll talk more about the fabric here in just a second. It's finicky. And then finally, now this is fleece, and I love that, and this makes it nice and cozy, but I did, underline my sleeves with lining fabric. So I just took lining fabric for the two sleeve pieces, and I literally just put, it on top of the regular sleeve pattern pieces and serged them together and sewed them as one. Just so that that's slick. So if she's got a long sleeve shirt on, which she very well will probably have in the springtime, it will slide on and off a lot easier, not get stuck on the fleece that's inside the sleeve. Okay, what else? I think that's it about the construction. So real quick, I'll show some footage of her in the jacket right now. She loves this, and yeah, she's gonna get a ton of wear out of this. It's like the color of her eyes, the fabric is, and she liked that it's nice and snuggly. It fits her to a T. Yeah, this is gonna get a whole lot of wear now that she's in women's wear, and she needs a new raincoat. Her other one had kind of gotten too small. So she's excited to pull this out and wear it and keep her warm, because our springs here in Indianapolis can be very questionable. We can have snowstorms in spring, you never know. So she probably won't get much wear out of this until we get into a little bit of the warmer months, but yeah, here's to positive thinking. Once Christmas is over, I'm almost completely over the snow. Maybe a little bit of snow in January. Definitely by the time we're in February, I am over the snow. And sometimes we can have snow all the way through the end of March. So anyway. All right, let's talk about sewing with soft shell. So soft shell is synthetic, which means that it does not press well. You have to use low heat on it, and it's very springy, so it keeps popping back on you. Also, it is bulky, and so you want to try and reduce bulk as much as possible. Now, this is not unlike sewing with leather, really. It also shows if you have to unpick a seam. In fact, I'm looking at a couple places I did have to end up unpicking. I actually sewed one of the pockets on the wrong side, and so there's some seams. You can see some unpicked areas, you know, on the sides of one of the pockets, and I think eventually those will kind of close up with some, you know, rubbing a little bit. But you want to try and not unpick this as much as possible. I mean, isn't that the goal for any sewing project? You never want to unpick anything, but it will show your stitches if you're not careful, or your previous stitching line if you're not careful. So I've talked about it before. I'm not a perfectionist. I'm not too worried about it, but yeah, you want to try and keep that as minimal as possible. Also, because of the bulk, I'll talk about seams first. So I I top stitched all of my seams open. So on the right side, I have them top stitched on either side of the seam. And on the inside, because this doesn't ravel, I just trimmed close to the stitching line. Now you could serge that if you wanted to, but there's no reason to. And I don't think it looks bad. I think it looks kind of cool actually, because the fleece kind of fluffs up around the seam line a little bit. So I left my seams raw, just top stitch them down, and then I trimmed close to the stitching on all the major seams in the coat. And then for anything such as the facing she wants you to fold over 1/4 inch and then fold it over 1/4 inch again to top stitch. I just folded it over once at 1/2 inch because I wanted that whole amount taken out, and then stitched it down and then trimmed inside because I wanted, you know, again, at least amount of bulk as possible. What else? Using pins on this is also very difficult. I have a lot of stray threads here. Whoops. Using pins on this is not ideal. Number one, because it's so thick, it distorts the fabric, and so you're not really, I mean, I used pins to put the sleeves in, but, you know, doing like a hem or whatever, it just distorts it, and just enough that it's not ideal. So I used Wonder Tape. And if you guys are familiar with Wonder Tape, it's phenomenal, but it is like double stick tape, and it washes away. So I used Wonder Tape a ton in this jacket. I used it for my facings. You know, when I went to top stitch down the facing, I used Wonder Tape to stick it down so that it would all stay in place. I used Wonder Tape for, I always use a Wonder Tape or like a Steam-a-Seam or something to attach my zippers because putting pins into a zipper tape I find always distorts a zipper, and it's almost impossible to get them in even on both sides. So I always use a double-sided, like a Steam-a-Seam or Wonder Tape to put my zippers in. I mean, that's just a no-brainer. And I also used it for the hem, so I basically just glued down the hem before I stitched it to help keep everything in place. So Wonder Tape is a huge thing. And also here, I was able to use fusible interfacing in the parts that called for interfacing. I just used regular old weft interfacing that I had in my stash, and it fused fine. I mean, I wasn't super careful about using low temperature. You can use a pressing cloth. You need a little bit higher temperature to fuse a lot of these fusibles. I mean, definitely test a scrap if you're unsure, but in all honesty, I never change the heat temperature on my iron. Never. It's the same for when I'm ironing wool as to when I'm ironing silk as to when I'm ironing polyester. I'm just, I have a Teflon foot on my iron as well, which helps. But I'm just, you know, maybe a little careful, a little quicker when it's synthetic than I am otherwise. Or I'll use a pressing cloth. I do use an silk organza pressing cloth for a lot of things, and that does help. So that would definitely be something you could do. But I did use fusible interfacing on everything. Again, I use these spring snap buttons, and I think it's just the nature of the way that it snaps. They're just, I mean, it's a heavy duty snap. It's just one little hole I have to put through, and then there's a tool that I hammer to get them all set in. But they go in nicely on either side. This is just a really nicely drafted pattern. Again, this is my third time making it. I've enjoyed it every single time. It's kind of a fun make. This fabric, again, was a little more finicky, so it did make sewing things a little harder. But, I mean, nothing awful. Another thing I will say, so for one of the facing pieces on the zipper, you fold it over. You're folding it wrong sides together, and then you're supposed to press it, and then it gets attached into the front of the coat. Well, I couldn't really, I mean, it wasn't pressing, and so I just sewed it. I basted the raw edges together within the seam allowance, and I did go to hit it with an iron just to kind of flatten it a little bit, and there was air trapped in there. It did a when I went to hit it. I'm like, well, that's interesting, but it makes sense because, you know, this coated fabric, you know, it went out through the stitching line, but it was an interesting issue that I wasn't really anticipating, that there would be air trapped in there. I understitched the facing on the hood for as much as that I could go, only because it's magical, and you guys know I love a good understitch, and it just helps turn things right side out. And then you top stitch along the outside of the facing all the way around the hood, so I found that worked out fine. What else? If you're having issues because it is slick on the one side, a Teflon foot or a walking foot, actually if you have a walking foot, definitely any of these trickier fabrics, a walking foot is preferable. It will keep your sides together, or your two layers together really, really nicely. Although the Wonder Tape really does work wonders, and it really helps keep things, you know, from shifting and getting too squiffy when they're underneath the, that's a British term I picked up from watching YouTube channels, and someone had commented when I used the term squiffy that means you're drunk, but that makes sense. Like when it's all wonky, like, yeah, little drunk. Anyway, what else do I have to say about this coat? It's got her hair on it. I mean, it's just a wonderfully drafted pattern. Oh, on the cuff. The cuff, on any cuff, it has you sewing, you know, it sews it to the right side, and then you turn it, you know, you sew your ends, and then you turn it inside, and you're supposed to tuck it under. I didn't do that on this. I literally just folded it over because of the nature, and I trimmed close to the edge. And you know, maybe that's a little less professional looking, but no one's really gonna ever see that. And just the reduction in bulk there was huge and helped huge. And I think it made the finished sleeve cuff just look a ton better. She's not gonna roll these. I mean, this is a coat. So I just, again, just sewed it down and then trimmed off that excess there, and that worked a ton better than trying to fold it under, because you just get too many layers under there, and my machine was not having it. Most of the, I mean, my machine was sewing through it. My presser foot only raises so high, and when I get too many layers on there, I literally can't get it under the presser foot. Now on a home machine, sometimes you can get a little bit of extra if you like yank it up. Not a ton, but I mean, my machine goes up pretty high. It's an industrial machine. But, you know, things get really, really thick, and I just literally can't get it underneath the presser foot. So I found that worked a lot better with this fabric as well. So I think that's about it for the Kelly Anorak. Again, she loves it. It was a big hit as a gift, so that is always good. The fabric came from Minerva. I do have an affiliate link for that. I'll leave it down below if you want some. Affiliate link meaning I get a commission if you buy any. Totally up to you. You can find soft shell in a lot of places. They did have quite a few colors of this though. This is the Dusty Mint that I used on this one, and again, it's the color of my daughter's eyes, so it's about perfect. But yeah, this is just such a good coat. Like, it just looks so professional. It's a proud make, you know? Like when you finish it, it just makes you feel proud because it looks very professional when all is said and done. All right, that's all I've got for today, guys. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Let's see. What are you seeing next? I am not sure. I pre-recorded this is one of the pre-recorded videos as well. Although after you're seeing this video, my kids go back to school today, the day that you're watching this video. So I will be able to resume my normal filming schedule. So I'll be a little bit better aware of what is happening. I do have my sewing retreat coming up at the end of this month, and I will have a plans video closer to that coming out, which is going to be, I get a lot done that weekend. So it should be a pretty epic one. So hit the subscribe button if you haven't already so you don't miss any of the wonderfulness. We'll be starting our sewing through the Sarah Nunn, and I can never remember the name of it, Sew Classics book that I was kind of inspired by. So we'll be doing some sew-alongs out of, well, not out of the book. There are no patterns with the, well, there is, but there's no, there's a pencil skirt pattern, but I'm going to be picking patterns like from that are current in Big Four and independent patterns to kind of go along with that book and slowly kind of sew my way through it throughout the year. So that is the plan. So we'll be delving into the A-line skirt, which is first here real soon. Okay, have a wonderful Tuesday, everyone, and I will see you guys on Friday. Bye.